Hey guys, 2024 is here. One of my favorite videos, one of my videos that makes me think. We're going to dive off into where to start. And it's going to be a little special video this time. We're going to talk about a couple different patterns that I think happens in January and where to start, where to make that first cast, where to set that boat down off pad, or what area of the lake to focus on. It's all about just trying to put yourself in the most high percentage area. You're not going to get a lot of bites in January. January, a lot of times, is the coldest time of the year, so we're going to try to break it down for you right here on Project E, where to start in the month of January. 3 different lakes, some different techniques on these lakes. You guys stay tuned. It's going to be really interesting. So the month of January, it's just one of those months that the water temperature is a very, very key component. I've always got water temperatures on my boat, but January, February, March, that's when I pay attention to it. The rest of the time of the year, I really don't care. But why I say that is, if you've got water temperature, let's take for an example here in Oklahoma, if I've got that water temperature in the low 50s in January, man, my fishing's still really good. I can still catch them on a crankbait. I can catch them a lot of different ways. I can catch them up the lake in that dirtier water. Now, when that water temperature gets down to the mid 40s, things change. I've got to focus on a lower end of that lake. I've got to focus on certain baits. Things change when that happens, because you're not going to get near the bites in those other stretches, in those other areas of the lake, when that water gets in the mid to low 40s. And let's talk about Florida fishing. Your temperature is not ever going to probably get in the 40s down there, very rarely, but it's the same thing, just on a different level. If that water temperature gets in the low 50s, buddy, it's cold in Florida, and I'm talking about South Florida or the high 40s. So you've got to think about, what is that water temperature and what is it doing? How cold is cold, and how is it going to affect where you start? And that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about, I know it's a lot I'm throwing at you. We're going to talk about three different states, 3 different lakes that the fish kind of do different things in those states, in my opinion. We're going to talk about Florida in particular. We'll just pull up, the Toho chain, Kissimmee chain. I fished there a lot, and we always seem to go there in January. And it's probably one of the toughest months, if not the toughest month in Florida for January, because that's their coldest month. Things start to get better as February goes along. It can be a really tough month, but I'm going to kind of show you some areas and some things and some techniques that I feel like have put things in my advantage when I go to Florida to fish that chain of lakes. I want to talk about Grand Lake. It's just an hour and a half here from my house, close. I fish there all the time. I've probably fished there more in January than I have anywhere else in the country in my life. There's years that I'll go over there every day in January, no matter what the temperature is. And then I'm going to talk about Hartwell, another lake that I have fished a lot early in the year like that. So, Grand's a threadfin shad, Hartwell's a herring, and then you go down to Toho and all those lakes. That's more of a shiner deal and shad deal. So let's start right here at the house on Grand Lake. Something I'm very, very familiar with, and fish there a lot. And the first thing I want to do is I want to know what that water temperature is when I put my boat in. Because if it's mid 50s, that opens up a whole nother section of the lake. Dirtier water, more stained lakes. Any lake, no matter if it's Grand or your lake, wherever you're at, generally speaking, the upper end is going to be your dirtiest water, midsection, your mixing water, and the lower end your clearest water. It's that way at Grand, bar none. And if that water's in the mid 50s, a whole lot more of that lake comes into play. That whole upper end, the midsection, the whole thing's open. That's when, man, it's wide open. I'm going to be fishing channel swings. It's all open. That's when you need to go back and look at a December, November video or a February video. So generally speaking, in January, that water's going to be low 50s, high 40s, and it's going to be getting colder. We've got a major cold front coming in, right now at the 1st of January. Next week looks to be cold, so that water temperature is going to be plummeting. And what I do to put to put everything in my advantage, I want to be in the cleanest water possible. That could be relevant, because like if I'm over at Beaver, if I'm over at Table Rock, well heck, those whole lakes can be clear, you know, like it's different on Grand, you know, I really have to go to that lower end for that water to be clear. You know, if you're at Beaver, well heck, that whole thing's clear. You know, you don't have to necessarily be at the lower end. That whole midsection's plenty clear. So when I say the clearest, cleanest water possible, I'm talking about 2, 3, 4 foot of visibility. You know, when you get over that, it's all clear. So I need to be in that cleaner water versus that 1.5 feet. You got to remember, I live in Oklahoma, so we get dirty, muddy water, and we've had instances like that where the whole lake's like that, and that's a whole nother video. Right now, we're not getting a lot of rain, so for 2024, you know, things are going to be clean. Grand's going to be clean way up the lake, and you know, the areas are the things that I think about. You know, there's going to be really kind of, I feel like on all these lakes, you know, with the exception of Florida, 2 separate patterns. I think there's always going to be fish shallow. And, you know, and that water's in those mid-50s like we talked about earlier. Those fish are going to be really strong. You can catch them. If that water's in the 40s, there's still fish shallow. You can still catch them. There's just not as many of them, but man, they can be big. Like in my opinion, if I want to go catch 4 or 5 big fish, that shallow bite is something that I'm going to look for, you know. But then the other scenario of that, the most consistent bite on all these bodies of water is that deep bite, you know, just lower into the lake, clean water, fish relating to shad. You can get a lot of bites doing that, you know, and there's kind of some different techniques. Some of them overlap right there. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but you know, that deeper bite, you know, for me, let's just break off into it. Like if I'm going to go to Grand, one of the best spots in the whole lake, you know, the lower end, that Ketchum Cove, you know, when you get a south wind, it blows all across all this open water. It goes into this Ketchum Cove, and then like in particular, where am I going to start in that Ketchum Cove? Well, this is like with any lake. I'm going to start, and I'm going to follow that creek channel, and I'm going to see all the areas it touches. You know, it touches right here on this back left corner. You know, it touches a couple of these points over here. Channel swings. I am going to look at channel swings the month of January on whatever lake it is, if your lake has channels in it. You know, when we get to Florida, we talk about Florida, it's going to be a little bit different. But start idling those things. You know, idle, start at the front, idle to the back, and first of all, take note of what depth you're seeing the majority of the shad. You know, are they 10 foot, 15 foot, 20 foot, 25 foot, 30 foot? What are they? That's also going to tell me what depth I need to start looking for these shad related, these deeper fish that are going to be the most consistent for you in January. And you know, historically, you know, like this channel bend right here, it's got a lot of docks on it. There's going to be fish somewhere on there. That's 2/3 of the way or almost to the back of that creek, you know. And a lot of times you'll find, or I find, you know, when you start idling, you start looking at these places, a lot of times those fish will congregate in January right where that water jumps up, you know. And Grand, let's say, you know, maximum depth, I'm guessing right here off the top of my head, is 100 feet. You know, and for Grand, you know, when that water depth jumps from like that 50 to 30 or 30 to 20, you know, that's where they're going to congregate, with that last bit of deep, consistent temperature holding water where it jumps up to that normal depth that we all fish, like 20 foot. That's the zone a lot of times that where you need to start. So, you know, here in this pocket, it's that stretch right there. You know, that's where it happens. You know, your lake, you've got to figure out where that is depending on how steep your lake is. But man, that stretch right there, you got docks, you got some points, you know. It's kind of tough to fish in there because you got a lot of docks, you know, but you've got an open bank right there. So, you know, that jerk bait, you know, a jigging spoon, that vibrato that we talked about in the last you know, video, you know, tossing it into those docks, you know, and jigging it up and down in those docks, you know, those are going to be techniques that are going to work in here. So to recap, what I'm talking about here is find out where that shad is. Think about where that water jumps up from that deeper to that shallower to that 20 foot. That zone, that's what you want to look for. And channel swings. I can't stress to you enough, channel swings, channel swings, channel swings. You know, you can see right here, over here in this pocket, you can see it gets flat, deep, flat. Got a real steep bank on the left. You know, it's steep over here on these points. That's the kind of stuff I'm going to look for, those channel swings, those deeper banks in a section of the lake where it jumps up. And then shad. Don't stop if you don't have a lot of shad in that area. Now, as the end of January comes along, you know, and shad start dying, things can start to get a little tougher yet still. So think about how long you got to pause your jerkbait. You know, we're getting all the way off in there. You know, how fast is your jerkbait sinking? You know, a jigging spoon will come more into play. But generally speaking, our waters doesn't get down to that 42 to the very last, and that's only a few week window when that happens, but it can be tough when it does. If that does happen, here's another scenario what to go do. You know, those fish, I mean, they're just shad everywhere. Think about a shallower version of a fish. You know, one thing that happens on Grand and a lot of lakes, you got a few creeks that have consistently running water. And when that lake gets really cold, like it has, you think about this Elk River running in, well, it's constant running water. And if I've got 42-degree water out here in the lake, but I've got the Elk River running in at 46, 47-degree water, that's going to be a more consistent bite, especially after a big cold front. Like if you've had a big cold front come through and you feel like that water temperature's plummeted, run to an area of your lake that has a consistent water supply. It happens a lot in all those Tennessee lakes, Georgia, I mean, all over the country. You can just look on Google Earth and you can see which creeks run year round. And the more water you got running in, the more consistent that water temperature is going to be. And it's going to be warmer than a lot of times some of those main lake things where it gets so cold. So that's kind of that shallow water technique I'm talking about. Find where that water's running in. You know, again, find that depth. You know, a lot of times I'll follow that water out to that 15, 16 feet. You'll see a big temperature change, you know, from that, whatever it may be. You know, you'll see, and I say a big temperature change, it's only 3 or 4 degrees, but it's going to be a temperature change. And that's the area right there from there up's where I want to start. So again, back to that temperature gauge. Really important to have that temperature gauge. Have it up there on your trolling motor when you can see it and see where it changes to figure that stuff out. And a lot of times you might see a color change. So those are the things that I look for, you know, channel swings, where that water really jumps up, and then consistent water supply coming in if I'm looking for colder water. You know, those are some areas like, you know, just in the Elk River, man, that bridge right there, we talk a lot about bridges, that's as good as can be. These channel swings back here, you know, this old bridge that goes across right there, those are all very high percentage, high consistent areas. If you notice right here, we've got deep water and then it goes to shallow. You know, that's where I won the Classic, but a lot of times those fish will winter all out here, you know, in this last mile stretch of deep water. They're going to be somewhere up and down in that stretch, and it can be dynamite in there because it just concentrates a lot of the fish because that's the most consistent water supply. The shad are all go right there because it's a more consistent temperature. But that's Grand Lake. That's some of the stuff I look for when I'm fishing in January on Grand Lake. Okay, another lake I want to talk to you about. We'll do Florida last. I just feel like that's probably maybe not as a broad area for you viewers. Let's talk about Hartwell Lake. All right, Lake Hartwell. Okay, a big difference, I think. There's lakes and I don't understand. I can't put a finger on it because, you know, Hartwell is herring, and those herring roam all over the place, and they're ditch related. And I think those fish, like there's lakes like Rayburn and Toledo Bend and other lakes in the south, Clarks Hill, Hartwell, that maybe they don't have herring, but they're all still ditch related. And what I mean by that is, you know, you're going to have a pocket running in there, and those fish are going to be right out here in the middle of this pocket somewhere. And you'll figure it out. When you idle down through there, you start seeing shad, you start seeing bass underneath them, and it'll be a depth, you know, and again, a lot of times it's that where it jumps, you know, from 50 to shallow, you know, just 50, 40, 30, 20, that last half mile stretch. And you know, initially when I was going to do this video, I was thinking, man, are those ditch fish always herring fish? But they're not. You know, I think it's more, we have fish in the middle of those drains when we use the word drain. We use the word drain when we're talking about flatland reservoirs. Rayburn's a flatland reservoir. We say drains all the time when we go fish Rayburn. Toledo's a flatland reservoir. What's that lake in Jackson, Mississippi? Ross Barnett. It's a flatland reservoir. Now that's kind of an odd thought about talking about drains, that drain scenario in January is going to be a lot shallower because the water's a lot dirtier. Clark's Hill, we talk about drains. You know, you get over there to Hartwell, yeah, it's got a lot of drains, but it's also a little bit deeper. It's kind of a cross between a flatland reservoir and a highland reservoir. And just real quick, flatland reservoirs are a lot flatter, highland reservoirs are a lot steeper, kind of what the name appears. But a pattern in January that I think happens all over this lake, and a lot of lakes like it, is those fish will hem those shad up in those drains. You know, somewhere in the back of those things, you will see shad, you'll see, you know, bass down on the bottom. You know, you just get out there and you start looking, and a lot of times you won't see the bass. I can't tell you how many times I've been at Hartwell and man, I'll start seeing shad and I was like, man, I don't see any bass, but I'll start fishing and they're tucked so tight to the bottom until you throw out there and you get one of them to come up off the bottom, then you start to see them, and there'll be a bunch of them. It's crazy. It was that way with fish over at Norman last year. I went and pre-practiced Norman in January, and I guess it was before January, maybe it was December, I don't really remember, but man, there's fish tucked on the bottom out there deep, and you would see them come off the bottom, man, there were spotted bass, there'd be a bunch of them. So just because you don't see bass, don't necessarily mean you don't want to stop and fish. If you see shad, that's when you want to stop and fish. And once you figure out that depth that's all happening, you can duplicate it over that section of the lake. Now, if you move down the lake or up the lake, that depth can change. But like a couple areas that like when I go, like when you look at Hartwell, Edwin, which one of these do I go in first? Well, that's a great question. I like to find ones that are a little bit irregular. And like, you know, when I was looking at this, man, one of them really stood out to me right here. See how this one comes in and it doglegs? And it goes from 50 to shallow really quick in a dog leg. And to me, that looks really, really good. And if I had a boat dock there, man, that would be even better. I'm going to zoom out here on Google and just see what it says about having boat docks on that thing. All right, zooming in here on Hartwell, I put a mark on this because I think I put a mark on it. Yeah, it looks really good to me. A north wind's gonna blow right in it, a north-northwest wind after a front. I've got this deep water that comes in. Those fish, I got a really sunny day, man, they can be underneath this dock, ambush any shad that are out there, you know, roaming. You know, a boat dock just adds to it. Do you have to have a boat dock? Absolutely not. But I look for something like that dog legs, or maybe something that gets narrow, or maybe a point that sticks out. You know, a couple other spots that I marked here on this map. This one right here. I've got a big area of open water the south wind can blow in, and it makes a dog leg right about the depth that I'm talking about, where it changes from that deep water to that shallow water. I marked another couple right here. Let me just see if I can find them. Oh, this one. I thought this one was interesting. I've got a couple big points that stick out. You can see I've got a big point here, a big point here. So it's a big, wide body of water that gets restricted really quick. So it's just like deer hunting, man. Anytime I can put everything into a narrower path for those bass, to me, this narrows down how far they have to chase those shad, or those herring in this case, for those to bite. So to answer your question of, man, which one do I, because this lake's huge, which one do I pick? You know, this one's kind of different. You know, it's got a big secondary point, you know, at a turn right there. That's the stuff I want to find. So that creek's going to come and it's going to turn in front of that point right there. That's the kind of stuff I want to look for January fishing, deep fishing at Hartwell. Now, the other side of that coin, we talk about it. There's not all of them are going to be deep. If I had to go there and I wanted to fish shallow, there's going to be a pattern on this lake on the last one or two boat docks in flatter pockets. You know, if you were to come into, I want to find one I'm passing up a lot because it's not the right type of pocket. And I like smaller pockets, like this pocket right here. See how we have a boat, like an isolated boat docks in the back of a pocket. You know, I can hit those really quick. Those aren't too isolated, and that's not too flat of a pocket, but you get the idea. I want to find a flatter pocket that has one or two boat docks right there There's one in the very, very back. There's one in the very back that I would go fish. That's going to be a pattern on Hartwell. It's a pattern on a lot of lakes. When you have that deep water and it gets really shallow towards the end, that last 1 or 2 boat docks, throwing a jig up there, a shaky head up there, whatever your favorite bait is. But there's always fish on boat docks year round, and that's a great way to catch a few big ones, especially on Lake Hartwell, in January, I think. All right, so let's talk about Florida. Man, Florida is a different animal altogether than these other lakes that we're talking about, and it just seems like we've always started our seasons in Florida, either on the Harris Chain, on Toho, on Okeechobee. And here's what I've learned through the 20-something years I've been bass fishing. Clean water. You don't go down there trying to be an Oklahoman finding dirty water. You're on Mars if you're trying to fish dirty water in Florida, and especially in the wintertime. That's pretty much a year-round rule. Cover water. I can't stress to you enough, so much of Florida all looks the same. It all is very, very target-rich environments, all very, very, everything looks fishy. Everything looks fishy because it's a very flat reservoir, lots of stuff to throw at. You have to cover water. It may not be the right bait, it may not be the perfect bait, but it doesn't matter. When you find the fish, they're going to tell you. You're going to get a bite, you're going to see a swirl, you're going to get something happen. So cover water, and when you catch a big one, that's when you need to slow down and figure out if that's the area. Make a circle around it, make another circle around it. So put baits on that you can cover water. Even if you're a worm fisherman, don't hit everything. Keep that trolling motor on a constant speed every 20 feet. Flip in there, because eventually you're going to find them, and that's what you have to do in Florida, is to cover that water. One of the best patterns in Florida is hydrilla. Find hydrilla with a lipless crankbait in January, bar none, one of the best patterns. Here at Lake Toho, for the last few years, there has been a massive grass bed right out here, in front of the canal or the gate, and you can't fish it all in a day. And that's why I say you've got to cover water. Put a lipless crankbait on, put a vibrating jig on, and go, 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 go. You're going to find some little key irregularity, some hard spot in there, and it changes every year, and you're going to get a bite. And you come back in an hour, you'll get another bite there, and there's always going to be, it's just like that wad of fish is in that. Sometimes it's the size of your boat, sometimes it's the size of your house in that area. And there's not going to be a depth change like we have at Rayburn or Toledo or other grass lakes. A lot of times it's just a flat area. Sometimes it's just better grass. This lower end of this, if I was to go down there, I would put my favorite lipless crankbait on, my favorite vibrating jig, and I would cover a lot of water doing that. One year we were there, all that offshore grass was right out here, and that's where it was won. Lake Toho, for the most part, has the most and the biggest fish. Lake Kissimmee is really, really good, but a lot of times it's a lot dirtier. And in my opinion, I think it gets better later in the year, February, March. It's a dirtier lake. It's not as clear. It doesn't have as much hydrilla. A lot of times, if there is hydrilla, it's in this bay right here. Somewhere down this right edge, this left edge. There can be hydrilla there. Sometimes there's some hydrilla over here down this right side, and sometimes there's some hydrilla all the way down at the end. But if I'm to go there in January, I want to find hydrilla, and I think the best area of it is Toho. Now, Cypress always plays a factor if things stay warm. The problem with Cypress, man, it's a shallow lake. A cold front really, really affects it. But it's sometimes has some good hydrilla in it. It's one of those things you always got to check. Now, hydrilla we talked about. We talked about covering water. We talked about clean water. Man, if you have water moving in Florida in January, if any time, got to fish water moving. Where a canal leaves a lake, like right here, as good as any. Where it comes in, right there. Any little corners down these canals. Don't ever overlook moving water in Florida. That's like the trump card. That's the ace of spades. Like if you go to Florida and you've got moving water, you've got to fish it. Then the last thing to think about, if you have a warming trend, And I've seen this down there in January. You know, it can go from, it's just crazy. Like if you don't get any wind, that water temperature can go from the low 50s to 60, 62 in a week with no, you know, all sun, no wind. Like those fish, and you have a full moon, it can be magical. Like you can, there's always going to be fish spawning, I think, in Florida on those full moons if you have the right temperature. So if you happen to go down there for your trip and it's a full moon time of year, there's fish going to be spawning somewhere if that temperature is right. You know, upper 50s, low 60s for that spawn. So keep that in mind. That just completely changes everything. Again, you got to cover water to find those fish, but you know, you always have that in the back of your mind if you go down there. So just to reiterate a little bit, you know, cold conditions, cold fronts, tough fishing. I want to be in this biggest bay of water, the biggest mass of water, the most consistent water temperature, and I want to fish hydrilla. I want to make those fish react with a fast-moving bait. If I've got a little bit more consistent conditions, you know, Lake Cypress, those shallower things, some of that Kissimmee grass, some of those lily pads, some of that stuff will come into play. But under those cold front conditions, I want to be out over that grass covering water. So guys, I hope this helps. I hope this gives you some things to think about on your body of water. You know, I feel like what I am telling you here can relate to a lot of different bodies of water all across the country. It's just pretty much the basic rules of bass fishing, you know, just an area where to start and why you want to start there. That's what I try to do with this video series. I hope you enjoy it. Give me that thumbs up. Give me a subscribe if you don't mind. And just by doing that, you could be a lucky winner next month of winning an Optima battery. This month, we went through here and we randomly picked from our October video. Let me find it right here. I've got a text. You are going to win a free Optima battery certificate from the fine folks at Optima Battery. I've got BC Alice Jr. BC Alice Jr. Man, the comment you left, awesome. Thank you again for showing us how to start and your thoughts about why. It makes us see things we never thought about. Man, I really appreciate you leaving that comment, buddy, just for leaving that comment and being a subscriber. Send me an email through my website and I will send you a certificate for a brand new Optima battery of your choice. Just a great thing that Optima Batteries does to help support this video. It's a where to start. You got to have a great Optima battery in your vehicle to start, to go to the lake. You got to have Optima battery in your boat to get started, to go fishing. So it's just a great partner to be supporting, and they support you guys by giving one away every month. So man, thank you. Appreciate the follow, appreciate all the kind words that you guys leave on the channel, and we will see you again here real shortly. Hope you catch your personal best in 2024. I can't wait to get the season started. We start down at Toledo Bend the end of January, and man, they'll probably be out in those drains. There'll probably be some shallow fish. That's going to be a decision I'm going to have to make when I get down there. I can't wait to go. I love Toledo Bend. It's been a long time since I've been there, but great big lake, and I can't wait to get down there. Here's to 2024 and some of the best fishing to come.